Welcome to the BrightWord Books Podcast, where we explore the stories behind today's most captivating books and the authors who bring them to life. I'm your host, Chris Dabbs, and in this episode, we're honored to sit down with Lorin J. Zaner, a seasoned criminal defense attorney with decades of courtroom experience, to discuss his powerful new memoir, The Making of Darth Zaner. This isn't just another legal memoir. It's a raw and gripping account of what it's like to fight for justice in some of the most complex, controversial, and emotionally charged cases imaginable. From the wrongly accused who desperately needed a voice to the contentious trials that tested every ounce of skill and resolve, Zaner takes us inside the strategy, the pressure, and the personal cost of defending others when the stakes couldn't be higher. Drawing on real cases, behind the scenes battles, and candid reflections, he reveals the moral challenges and unwavering belief that every person deserves their day in court. So settle in. You're about to step into the mind and memory of a man who's been on the front lines of the justice system for over 4 decades. So here we are, Mr. Zaner. Thank you very much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Chris, and please call me Lorin. That would be great.
Lorin, thank you. Will do. Well, listen, let's just jump straight in because I want to try and get through as much as we possibly can in our short space of time. And I need to keep myself from asking you too many questions, I think, because this is fascinating stuff to me. So let's start straight away with what inspired you then to write The Making of Darth Zaner? Was there a particular case or a moment maybe in your legal career that served as a kind of turning point for this project?
Well, I've been practicing almost 50 years, and my practice is a little different than most lawyers. Most lawyers only do one or two things, but I've done lots of different things. A lot of high-profile criminal cases, but also domestic, personal injury, bankruptcy, general civil. So I have a skill set which is different than most. And in fact, having been involved with all those different areas of law, I think has made me a different lawyer, a better lawyer. So I felt it was important for me to get my thoughts out, to one, to try to help people, two, to have my family understand why I was gone so much, working all the time. And I just thought could be helpful for people and interesting for people to take a look at.
Yeah, right. So that's quite rare then, isn't it, to have those skills all the way through and that knowledge. In this book, we're looking at basically a raw, unfiltered look into the life of into you as a criminal defense attorney, right? So that's what we're concentrating on. And what did you want readers to understand most about the realities of defending the accused? Now, either whether they're guilty or innocent, we'll come back to that, but what did you want people to think?
Well, it's a lot of work involved. You just can't go into court and try a case. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of writing, there's a lot of information gathering, there's talking to witnesses, there's preparing, making major decisions, preparing motions, trying to convince the court to allow certain evidence in, trying to get the court to not allow the state to present certain evidence. So it's a lot more than just showing up to court. There's a lot of work, a lot of research involved, especially if you have scientific issues. You need to be as skilled as the state's experts when it comes to asking them questions. You can't let them bamboozle you. And a lot of times, I have found out that the experts don't necessarily know the most recent research. And if I know it, I can attack them strongly with the knowledge that I've gathered through getting information from other experts, from doing my own research. It helps a lot.
No, I can see that. Yeah, because the experts are, I guess, quite a few cases hinge on expert testimony, right? So yeah, if you can make sure that it's correct it's verifiable, I guess, then that makes a lot of sense. And in talking of this, you share vivid accounts of real courtroom battles. Can you talk us through one of the most unforgettable or shocking cases that you defended, and what made it stand out?
Well, I've had a number of them. It's hard to just pick one. Uh, I'll pick one of them that I had a stepfather charged with molesting his two stepkids. He had 12 counts of rape, life rape, which meant if he was convicted of any of the counts, he goes to prison the rest of his life. His wife was also charged, and the lawyer that she had, I didn't think was skilled enough to handle it. So I was able to convince the wife to obtain a friend of mine who was of great assistance and help throughout the trial. The trial was obviously very contentious. There was a lot of preliminary motions and things that were filed. There was some evidence that the state should have gathered when they came to arrest my client, but they never did. I gathered it. And at one point, the prosecutor accused me of withholding inculpatory or evidence that would help convict my client and not turning it over to the state. They threatened to file criminal charges against me. They threatened to file a grievance against me. And at that point, I felt I might have a conflict. So I ended up withdrawing from the case. In the next month, I spent $10,000 talking to experts to assist me in determining whether or not what I did was accurate and correct. They both agreed to me, so I came back in on the case. Part of that, before I came back in, one night I was on my way home, and when we talked to the court about me having that information, the prosecutor accused me of potentially having that evidence and was going to file criminal charges against me. So that weekend, I was on my way home. A police car came off my street. A police car came right past me. I thought, hell, I'm going to get arrested. So I called a couple people what I should do. One of them said, well, cooperate with the police. And I was thinking, you're out of your mind. I'm not going to get arrested. So I ended up calling my stepson, who lived across the street from me, and I had him pack some clothes for me because my wife was out of town. I snuck in through the back door, grabbed the stuff and put it together. I then called my stepson to meet me at a hotel and get a room in his name so that if the police were looking for me, I wouldn't get arrested. He calls it the James Bond case. So went to court. The police being there was just happenstance, but I sure thought I was getting arrested. So I came back in the case, and we ended up going to trial, and nothing better than hearing 12 not guilties, and my client was totally acquitted of all the charges and released from being in custody about 14 months.
Wow.
So
That's
that was
incredible.
very satisfying for him and for me with the not guilties, and they never filed charges or anything against me.
And that was because you actually followed the procedures that they hadn't done.
Exactly. That was correct. I felt that information was important. And if anything, I thought the information was going to assist us in trial. So I contacted the prosecutor's office, as they do, letting them know that I had different materials and items I was going to use in trial. They're welcome to come and look at it. And they decided to go the other way, try to threaten me. But I don't scare easily.
Clearly, right. Yeah, I can imagine that going home and seeing that police car would have, yeah, definitely put something into you to make you do what you did. And the James Bond case, we'll remember that one. So you mentioned earlier on about lots of research that needs to be done, obviously during and before the case, and then all of the thing, and even before you take a case on, right? I guess. So what does a typical day look like then for a defense attorney handling like big, high stakes criminal cases like this? I mean, is there such a thing as routine in your line of work? I can't imagine there is, but it'd be interesting to know.
There's no such thing as routine. I would get to the office 5:30 or 6, and in the morning leave 7:30 at night, working on weekends. But not only just doing the criminal, doing other cases. I was in court almost every day, and I'd have as many as 3, 4, or 5. One day I had 10 cases all set at 9 o'clock in 5 different courts, which was interesting. I went to all the courts early, told them all of them I was going to be late, and got through it, and nobody was upset with me. As long as you let the court know what's going on, normally you can do those things. But as far as preparing for trials, takes a lot of work. You know, the first shaken baby case, I had never done one before. And there was the au pair case that was going on in Boston with Barry Scheck, where a nanny was accused of killing one of the kids she was watching. And I had somebody tape record 70 hours of all the direct and cross examination of every expert. I have materials probably 4 feet wide of materials about shaken baby concussions, retinal hemorrhages, all of those things. In fact, I had learned so much that by the time we were in trial and I'm examining the state's pathologist, at one point she says, "Mr. Zaner, you sound like a forensic pathologist." I said, "Thank you. Please answer my question." So that's the kind of work it takes to really know what you're doing.
Absolutely. So they'd have been some transcripts to go through, wouldn't they? That long. I mean, yeah. Again, it's preparedness, though, isn't it? It's making sure that you are, as you say, even if it is only temporary, but you're as good an expert as everybody else, right? So the thing that you've got to think about, though, when you're a defense attorney is your emotional detachment with this. Okay. So how do you balance that with empathy when defending clients who may be accused of terrible crimes? Those 12 rapes, for instance, that's pretty harsh. How do you work on that?
Well, we as defense attorneys have a constitutional duty to represent our clients, protect all of their rights. And I remember early on in my career, I was part-time public defender in juvenile court, and I got into a discussion with the judge. And the judge says, your job is to protect the best interest of your clients and make sure the right thing happens to them as far as getting help or getting treatment. And I had gone to a seminar in Reno, Nevada, that was put on by judges and prosecutors, and every one of them said, your duty as a defense attorney is to protect your client's constitutional rights, whether it's in their best interest or not. So if you have a client that really needs, let's say, drug counseling and drug treatment, but you have a good motion to suppress, which will dismiss the case, it's your duty to file the motion to suppress, even though it's not necessarily in your client's best interest to have the case dismissed. It's better that they get treatment. That's not your job. You're not a social worker. You're not a counselor. You're a defense attorney. You have to represent their constitutional rights and file motions that potentially can hurt them in the long run, but in the immediate, that's your job to do.
Well, you have to make sure that the law is upheld, right? And the procedures are followed. So now I can understand that. And obviously, many people ask how a lawyer can defend someone that they might believe is guilty. I mean, how do you respond to that? You must be asked that 1,000 times in your life. But what personal code or philosophy guides your work like that?
Well, it's real simple. As I said, I believe in the Constitution. Everyone has a constitutional right to have a defense attorney. And I'd rather have 100 guilty people walking the street than have one innocent person in prison. And I know for a fact there are innocent people in prison. Every so often you hear about people that are getting released through the Innocence Project. They find new evidence, they have new DNA testing procedures. So I do everything I can to represent my clients to make sure their rights are upheld, whether they're guilty or not guilty. It really doesn't come into play. The issue is, can the state prove it?
Yeah, actually, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, again, I can understand that. I think it is about making well, we have a saying that over here, which is like it all comes out in the wash, right? So at the end of the day, as long as everything is followed, then You gotta hope that the correct outcome happens, right? Sometimes I guess it doesn't, and you've seen that. But you talk about the personal price of being a defense attorney. I mean, can you share how the stress, right, or the moral complexity in these situations, or public perception, because apparently no one likes a lawyer, right, until they need one, how that's affected you over those years, both professionally and personally?
Well, knowing that it's my duty to represent people to the best of my ability, I've never really let that affect me. Sure, I've had a lot of people come up to me upset with me. How can you represent that person? Even
Mm.
my mother couldn't understand what I was doing until one time I took her to court and somebody had already been convicted. I didn't represent them. We were trying to obtain a new trial, and we had new evidence. So my mom came and watched, and she saw what the family was going through, and it helped changed her position to understand there are false charges out there. There are people that go through horrendous consequences, not only loss of jobs, loss of money, etc. I mean, I gave a speech one time in Chicago for a forensic society. There's, I don't know, 200, 2,000 people or whatever. And I took the role of being a juvenile who had been convicted of falsely convicted of a crime. And I started off, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lorin Zaner. I used to be a good student. I got good grades. I had a lot of good friends. And then one day I got falsely accused of molesting a neighborhood child. I lost all my friends. I got kicked out of school. I mean, all of that stuff. And people were looking at me like it really happened to me, but they got to see the consequences of false convictions. And there clearly are false convictions.
Yeah, yeah. It's mind-boggling, really, to think of that. But we have that over here as well, and people are released after like 30 years or something like that, and you just really feel for those people. Yeah, I mean, but has there ever been a moment though where you regretted defending a client or wish that you'd walk away from a case?
Well, it's not the case itself, it's the personality of the client.
Right.
And because, they hire you to represent them, you would think they would listen to you, but oftentimes they think they're smarter than you. They want you to do things that are not going to help the case, potentially could hurt the case, which I won't do. I'm in charge. And if you don't like it, find somebody else. So there have been cases that I wish I hadn't taken on because of the personality of the client, but because of the nature of the charge or what the person was facing, that's never negatively affected me.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Because again, you want the procedure to be followed properly and everybody to have that opportunity. Yeah, amazing that people will argue with you and think that they know better or think that you're not doing the best job that you possibly could. So, how has your view of the justice system changed throughout your career? You say 5 decades you've been practicing. I mean, has your belief in the system been shaken or strengthened, do you think, by your experiences?
I expect truthfulness. I expect the system to be fair, and it's far from being, it's certainly not perfect. Police lie, a lot of witnesses lie, they change their stories. Judges oftentimes are very political, at least in the states. The state judges, most of them are elected, so they're worried about what the electorate has to say. So, going in, becoming a lawyer, my background is a chemical engineer. I really had no background in law and didn't really know that much about it except the few things you'd read in the newspaper.
Mm.
But over the years, it bothers me a lot when prosecutors don't do their jobs correctly, don't turn over all of the evidence, and there are some that don't. Police make up stories and lie. That bothers me a lot. The system is geared to working where people are being honest, people are being fair, doing what the rules require you to do, and they don't necessarily do it. So it's been difficult But I understand that. You try to know your judges ahead of time, know which ways they may rule, which ways they may go, and work accordingly.
Mm, mm. So that's again one of the good things, isn't it, about being a sort of senior in the profession, because you can, you know who's on the circuit, you know what the judges are like, and you can, as you say, change your work method accordingly, judge to judge.
Well,
Mm,
and a lot of times I would talk, especially if I would go out of town to someplace I hadn't been to before, I would try to find local attorney to talk to see what I can find out about the judge.
yeah, yeah. And then I guess you look into their history and see what they've done with their previous cases and things. I mean, fascinating stuff, really. It just shows you, doesn't it? It's not just about the law, it's about psychology for not only, how you manage a case or how you manage a defendant, as we would say, or how you'd manage a judge or the police or everybody. All of these the factors you need to manage in order to be able to get an outcome that you want, right? So
Well,
it's
my feeling has always been when I go into the courtroom, when it's a trial, it's my courtroom, I'm in charge.
right,
Now,
yeah.
that doesn't happen necessarily, but that's the attitude I take.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have to, don't you? In that case, it's not just about the simplicity of the law, as it were, but it's about all those other things. Wow. Now, nowadays, that we're in the 21st century, but we had it in the 20th century as well. We often hear about media trials, right, and public assumptions of guilt, especially, say, in the US, where things are televised quite often. Obviously, over here, we don't have that in the UK, but the trials aren't televised. And so it's down to journalists to use shorthand and things like that. You can't film anything, you can't record it in an audio way or anything else. But that sort of keeps us, I guess, a bit safer on this side of the pond. But in the States, of course, with the televising of cases, court cases, I mean, how does this media trial and talking in the free press about cases that are happening at the moment, how does that affect the way that you work? And how does that affect the public assumption of guilt or not guilt or not guilty?
Well, my feeling has always been to talk to the media as much as you can and try to advance your position. I can tell you about a case I got involved in where a child was living with the father in California and the mother was nowhere in the picture. All of a sudden, the child's gone. And after about a month, the parents hired an investigator who found them in Toledo. The mom and her boyfriend had the child, even though there's no custody orders or anything else. And my investigator did a procedure where they went to the daycare where the child was at, and they were able to leave with the child. FBI was called, police were called, child kidnapped for daycare facility. Everybody went crazy over the whole thing. And I called my friend, who was one of the news directors, and said, "You need to get me on television tonight." And he did. And I think I was able to change public perception about what it was all about by being on television. Um, and my client ended up able to keep the child.
Right.
And in criminal cases, a lot of media attention. It really takes a good picking of the jury, which is called voir dire, and trying to eliminate those jurors that are totally biased and prejudiced, which is difficult. That case I told you about with the 12 rape counts, I was able to remove so many jurors for cause. They actually had to go out into the street to find jurors and bring them in.
Well,
I've never seen that before.
yeah, yeah. Well, something like that, I can imagine. I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, here in the UK, the media, we can't report anything that hasn't actually literally been said in the courtroom. So there's no conjecture that, it can't, that's the law. And so if you do that, you're in contempt and all sorts of stuff happens. So yeah, it's interesting to see how the two are different in that respect as well. So let's have a look at the character then of Darth Zaner. Let's talk about the title, The Making of Darth Zaner. It hints at a transformation. So who is Darth Zaner and what does that name represent in your journey as a defense attorney?
Well, let me tell you how it came about.
Mm.
I was representing a police officer charged with sex trafficking, which is obviously very serious. And we went to trial. He was found not guilty. And one of the women who represents victims of sex trafficking came up to me and she said, Lorin, we have a name for you. I said, what's that? Darth Zaner. So I thought that was a compliment, even though I'm not sure she said it that way, even though I know her pretty well. And, you know, I had a client years ago, a business client came in to see me. And he told me afterwards he had some criminal charges. And he told me that when he first came in to see me, he didn't think I would be strong enough in court because I don't have to demonstrate what I can do in a courtroom when I'm outside the courtroom, when I'm talking to clients. But when I'm in a courtroom, I take no prisoners and I can be, don't piss me off because I can be really obnoxious against witnesses. And so, people have called me, I'm a different person when I'm in a courtroom. And I said, well, that's my job. I will do what it takes within the law to try to make sure my client's found not guilty.
Mm. There's a different part of your personality then that is Darth Zaner, which is, yeah, as you say, manages the courtroom and does what needs to be done. So do you think it's necessary to do that sort of thing to survive in the courtroom world, I guess? Or was it just a coping mechanism? Or I guess you could think it's maybe even a shield, isn't it, really?
I think it's who I am that when I go to court, you know, I have a procedure that I do before I go to court. Um, I usually don't share it, but I will share it with you. I will stand up. Usually, one of my associates is coming with me, and I'll go, objection, objection, just to get myself in the right frame of mind to let's go kick some ass, right?
Yeah.
That's just a little thing that I do that gets me in the right frame of mind to get into the courtroom.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So in other words, you go from A to B, right? Then that's
Right.
it. That's the thing that helps. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, good tip. So after a career, after a career filled with intense legal combat, I mean, choosing juries is the very least of it. Well, or is it? It's actually probably a major part of it, right? What does justice mean to you now? Has your definition of this evolved over time?
Justice to me means that, especially the police and the prosecutors, need to be honest and follow the rules. Don't go above and beyond the rules. Don't do things that are improper and incorrect. The system is geared to work towards people being honest. You understand witnesses oftentimes won't be honest, and that's fine with witnesses. But the prosecutors have an obligation, police have an obligation. Do your job. Don't jump to conclusions. Oftentimes, they jump to a conclusion that somebody did it without looking at all the surrounding circumstances and all the other evidence. Do your job. Make the system work the way it's designed to work. And the thing is, there really is no better system than what we have. You have 12 people that hopefully are independent and are willing to exclude what they've heard, what they've seen, and listen to the evidence. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and that's not an easy thing to do, especially in those kind of cases that you were mentioning earlier. It would be wrong of me not to ask the question really about people not following the rules, whether that's the prosecutors or whether it's the police. But why do you think that is? Is it just because they've been sloppy and they're covering their backsides, or is it another reason? Which would be the most often? So the reason that happens most often.
I th- Sometimes it's through accident and not done intentionally, but a lot of times, sad to say that it's intentional because it's all about getting a conviction. It's not about seeking justice, which is
Yeah.
not just seeking a conviction. And too many prosecutors, I'll hear them tell me, well, I've got a lousy case, there's really no evidence, but I'm going to proceed anyway. And to me, that's totally wrong. That's not how the system should work. You should step up and say, The evidence isn't here. We're not likely to get a conviction. Why should we put the state, the city through the expense? Why should we put the defendant and his family through the expense and the mental anguish of going through a trial when they know they don't have a good case? To
Amazing.
me, that's outrageous.
Yeah, totally, isn't it? I mean, it really is. Then you have to wonder who the case was sold to in the first place, in terms of them deeming it worthy to follow it through. So, bearing in mind you've got all of this experience, both in cases and everything really of being a lawyer that you need. What about the young lawyers then who are entering the field of criminal defense today? What advice have you got for those, especially those with idealistic notions of right and wrong and justice?
It's sad to say many of the young lawyers that I see coming out of law school are not willing to put the time in, are not willing to put the effort in. They're looking at making a quick buck, take a small amount of money to try to get somebody to plead. A lot of these cases, you need to charge a lot of money because the amount of time that you're going to spend preparing and going through trial and all of the other issues, you're entitled to a lot of money.
Mm.
And many of them won't charge it. They just want to make a quick buck. They won't spend the time. They're not working as many hours as I did, not that they should, but I mean, I worked a lot, and that's why I gained the reputation that I did as being one of the top criminal defense lawyers in our area.
Mm. And thorough as well, obviously, with all
Right.
of that work, right? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so the younger people have got a different view on the work that needs to happen to become really successful and actually do the best thing by their clients. Okay, interesting. So finally, then, because we're running out of time, I told you we'd have so much to get through. What do you hope that your readers walk away with after finishing The Making of Darth Zaner? What truth or transformation are you hoping to spark in them?
Well, I'm hoping law students read it so they understand what you can do as a lawyer. I mean, I've saved so many people's lives. I have developed so many friends over the years who continually thank me. I have one man who sends me a Christmas card every year thanking me for saving his life. I mean, those are the kinds of things that make it worthwhile. So I think law students ought to read it, and the general public to get an understanding of what it's really like being a lawyer. It's not just getting money. It's a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of dedication. There's so many things that you have to know. And there's some funny stories in the book too. Like my daughter got called for jury duty and she wanted to know how to get out of it. And I said, well, I can't get you out of it, but this is how you answer this question. So I knew the judge she was in front of. And so they asked the question, do you know any lawyers? She raised her hand and said, yeah, my dad is Lorin Zaner, and he wants me to tell you, Judge, that you're a great and wonderful judge. So the whole place cracked up. The judge cracked up. She obviously was removed. And so she got what she wanted, but it makes for a funny story.
Yeah, absolutely. And the judge remembered that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. Well, listen, everyone, that's it. We're out of time. It's been fantastic. And you, there's listeners, have been listening to the BrightWord Books podcast and our conversation with Lorin J. Zaner. Now, this has only scratched the surface of what you'll find in the making of Darth Zaner. Inside its pages, you'll encounter unforgettable courtroom moments, surprising legal twists, and an unfiltered look at the human stories behind the headlines. This book is as much about the law as it is about courage, empathy, and the relentless pursuit of truth, even when the odds seem impossible, as we've been hearing. So, whether you're fascinated by the legal world, drawn to real life drama, or simply looking for a story that challenges how you think about justice, the Making of Darth Zaner will keep you turning pages long into the night. So don't miss your chance to experience the full journey. Grab your copy now on Amazon and join us next time on the BrightWord Books podcast, where we bring you the voices and stories that matter most. Lorin, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I hope we get to talk again in the future.
Chris, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.